New York City's own station, WNYC, in the city where more than 7 million people live in peace and enjoy the benefits of democracy.
Okay, so let's say you find yourself at some turning point in your life, like Dante's darkened wood. What do you do? Well, you seek direction from your family. Or, it's not even inconceivable that you might also look to the movies. And believe it or not, sometimes those two choices are more or less the same thing. By way of explanation, here's Next Big Thing contributor Steve Zeitlin.
Like everybody else in the United States, I felt I was married to the mob. I fell in love with gangster movies. I watch them every night. I've seen Goodfellas a whole bunch of different times. I just love the scene, for instance, when Joe Pesci is about to get made. That is, he's about to be inducted, about to become a real mobster in the Casa Nostra.
Guess what? They're gonna make him.
He's gonna make you? Tommy!
They open up the books. Paulie got the okay. You believe that? This little guinea bastard? You believe that? Huh? He's gonna get made? We're gonna work for this guy one day. He's gonna be a boss.
Okay, so maybe you're the one person in America who didn't see Goodfellas. But if you remember it, and you did see it, you'll know that he doesn't get made. He gets all dressed up, he puts on his tuxedo, he goes out to his induction ceremony, and lo and behold, he gets whacked. He gets whacked like they all get whacked. We love to see these guys get whacked. And we've been doing it for generations. Starting in 1912, when D.W. Griffith made the first silent movie about the New York City mob wars, all the way through The Sopranos. And for me, that world existed only in the movies. Nobody really talks like that, right? So you can imagine my surprise when I come face to face with Donald Semenza, and he first began to talk to me.
It would be a rule of thumb that if you wanted to be made, you had to have the courage, the cowardness, whatever you want to term it, to do somebody in.
Donald Semenza was never going to get made. He was never going to do anybody in. But he was a bona fide part of that world. And of course, when I met Donald, the first thing I wanted to do was to ask him about the movies. And what he told me was that there was one film that he feels truly captures the world in which he grew up, and that was Mean Streets.
What's the matter with you, Johnny? You kick around bullshit people that way. If you're worried about something, you gotta keep it.
You don't know what happened to me. I'm so depressed about other things. I can't worry about payments. You know what I mean?
It's so vivid. I think I'm back in the pool room or the club. It actually draws me in, takes me back.
It took him back to the streets. It took him back to Greenwich Village. It took him back to a time and place in New York City which had its own special language, a language he actually learned from his father.
He spoke neighborhood. Swag was stolen. Ubats meant you were crazy. That was an Italian phrase.
Those streets had their own language. And they had the nicknames, thousands of nicknames that you can hear in all the movies. And in fact, according to Donald, there was a good reason for it.
There were so many Tonys and so many Joeys, Most people did have a nickname or a tag. Pea shooter. A guy wanted to say prosciutto as an Italian meat. He happened to say gazoot, so he was nicknamed Gazoot. My cousin Dominic was Ish. My brother was B.O.
And all of these guys, like Gazoot, would end up in the social clubs, like the Medley Boys Social Club in the West Village. And it was one of thousands of bookie joints run by the mob. But you didn't have to go in there to bet.
You could just go in and have a cup of coffee. I'll have black, I'll have brown. Forget cappuccino to throw you out. What's the other thing, a latte or whatever? Yeah, those words, they were not to be used. There was a time in my life that I would feel so safe going to the social club. I would go out on a date and meet somebody nice and really didn't know how to act. I felt uncomfortable. And when I got back to the social club, I was very comfortable. And yet at the same time, I knew I didn't want to be there anymore. I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be the rest of my life.
So here's where it gets interesting. Donald graduates from 8th grade, and he suddenly sees a fork in the road. On the one hand, half of his class is going into drugs, half of his class is getting promoted into the mob. On the other hand, he's doing pretty well on his math tests, and he starts to see a glimmer of other possibilities. And he's at home in the social club, and yet he's not at home there. He's in the middle. He was trying to balance.
So I had this dual thing going. I loved the idea of hanging in these places, and at the same time, I wanted to learn more. So I studied jazz and things like that.
So Donald's trying to choose between the kind of romantic world of the mobsters and the straight world of real jobs that he might get in real life. And at the same time, the romantic world of the mobsters is all blurred with the world of the movies. One of the things that's always fascinated me about the mob is the fact that the mobsters were inspired by the movies as much as the movies were inspired by the mob. Rudolph Giuliani, when he was a prosecutor, talked about the fact that after The Godfather, mobsters talked differently. They listened to The Godfather, and they started using that speech in an even more intensified way than they were using it in real life. The world of the movies and the world of the mob get blurred a little bit. And even in Donald's life, they got blurred. He tells the story about John the Bug, who ran the Medley Boys Social Club. And one of the guys who worked for him was Fat Sal. Now, Fat Sal was skimming money off the profits. And he was in big trouble in the social club. And all of a sudden, he disappears. There's not a trace of him. But Donald runs into him, not on the street, on TV.
And there's some kind of soap on, and I'm sucking down some salami sandwich. And who do I see on the screen? Fat Sal. I can't believe it. And then one night we were all in the social club, see? The TV was on, and it was The Untouchables. And all of a sudden, somebody says, there's Fat Sal. He's on some flagpole. And somebody runs to the back room, tells John. So John comes running out of the back room. Where is that fat bastard? I'll kill him. No, he's on TV. And now he's yelling at the TV, kill that fat bastard. Kill him. And we're thinking to ourselves, wait a minute, John is rooting for the cops to doing Fat Sal. So we're all chuckling inside. We're never going to chuckle at John because of the reputation he has. He killed a couple of guys on Bleecker Street, so I heard. So John finally realizes his own emotion, and he says, well, maybe he'll be on next week. They'll get that fat bastard then.
Well, organized crime didn't get Fat Sal. In fact, he died of a heart attack. But organized crime didn't get Donald either. But it did get to him.
I was really in lots of fits of anger. I did some therapy group. I went in for about 4 or 6 private sessions, like one-on-one. And then he says, well, we work with group. We had lawyers. There was a rabbi in a group, person who worked as a secretary. People that have been there a while know how to just draw you out.
So years before The Sopranos, here's Donald Semenza in therapy, just like Tony Soprano. And how does he work it all out? He works it out through the movies, and particularly through Mean Streets, his favorite.
That really had an effect on me. It sort of scared me, I said, And the doctor asked me, who was I like? And I said, all of them.
You see, Donald identified with the bad guys in the movie, like Johnny Boy, who ends up getting whacked. But he also identifies with the kind of good guy in the movie, Charlie, who's obsessed with St. Francis and is determined to do good in the world. So Donald's life careened towards this moment of decision, the moment when he was offered a job by the mob.
And all I had to do was be taking phone numbers and then relay them to the bookmaker. Even if wires were tapped, they could never really break in somewhere. This was a scheme. I don't know if it would have worked because I turned the job down. But I thought about it. I mean, it was good money, but I couldn't do it. Just the thought of being arrested and having to say to my family, my mom and dad, I'm in jail. I couldn't do that.
Donald bet on himself. He became a messenger on Wall Street, and he worked himself up to being an office manager at Morgan Stanley with 16 people working for him. But he always felt that, I guess the wise guys They held him back. Not so much the wise guys, but that wise guy way of talking.
My speech probably hindered my career. I think I probably could have been VP. Maybe. I'm not saying I should have, or but I drop words and things like that. So what I say doesn't carry. So I always tell my kids, speak properly. Don't speak like your father.
But as the years went on, a funny thing started to happen. His kids started to kind of marvel at the way he spoke. And his wife, Pat, would ask him about the stories, and he started telling them as if he were showing a movie. And frankly, he was a little taken aback at Pat's reaction.
I would tell her about the people I grew up with, She said, Donald, you come from a subculture. I was definitely insulted. I mean, what do you mean subculture? I work, I pay taxes. So I met my friend Tony, who I was working with at the time. I said, Tony, not for anything, but I said to Pat about, us growing up, and she says, we came from a subculture. Imagine that. And my friend Tony says, of course we did. Don't you realize it?
Donald's subculture no longer exists, at least not in the places where he grew up in the village. It seems to have happened that the mafia myth outlasted at least the Italian mafia. And although they say you can still see the bullet holes at Umberto's clam bar where Joey Gallo was shot, all the old social clubs in the village are gone.
I still call it the village, but I mean, when I walk back to it, it's not the village I knew. I mean, I get a feeling like I'm walking in a morgue or something. I mean, it's dead. And when I walk through the neighborhood, I don't see anyone anymore. They're not here. I keep saying, where is everybody, It's just not around for me.
But it is around for Donald Semenza. Fat Sal, John the Bug, they still live in his imagination. If things had gone a different way, maybe he would have gone out and made movies about them. But Donald loved words, and so he's spending his retirement telling their stories in poems.
I hope I don't flub here. Here's the line. Let me get my glasses on. Back then it was the line. The line was everything back then. We walked up the line, waited for the bookmaker to get off the line, to give us the line. 5.5, 6.5, pick 'em, 8.5, 9.5, 2.12. We put our money on the line. We bet the games with the red line, the blue line, the foul line, the goal line, the 50-yard line, the finish line. We spoke the line back then. Our line had all the answers. It was the wise guy's line, not the wise man's line. We watched Mantle, Mays, and Snyder spray line drives between the lines. There was no place for Euclid's geometric lines, Shakespeare's poetic lines, Mozart's lyrical lines.
That's Donald Semenza reading from his poem, The Line. Steve Zeitlin, who, by the way, is the director of City Lore, the Center for Urban Culture in New York City. Steve says Donald told him he hasn't made a bet with a bookie since the Orioles beat the Dodgers in the 1966 World Series.